Alhamdulillah, wassalatu ala Muhammad Rasulullah. So inshallah we are going to continue with the seventh session about reading Ibn Khaldūn. And from the Muqaddimah, so today we'll talk about the last chapter in the first book, which is the last chapter in the Muqaddimah. So before that we have seen his concept of al-Umran in general. Then we talked about urban life. In fact, and before that, we talked both about rural life and about kingship and statecraft. The last time we talked about the economy, and this time it's a continuation of that, but in a general sense, because he will be talking about knowledge as a craft and the sciences and the disciplines that they were taught in his time. So it's a very comprehensive chapter. In fact, perhaps the longest chapter, roughly about 100 pages. And in this book, he called this a book. So in this subchapter, he presents his concept of knowledge, which is largely, he is coming from an Islamic tradition, and you will see some aspects of that. If you are familiar, they overlap, but he gives it, in a sense, his own twist, shall we say. So for him, al-ilm, knowledge, and he will be talking about three sources of knowledge. And for him, he will make coordinations, which I have not seen before done, with other realms, shall we say. So you have, first, you have al-hiss, you have al-aql, and you have al-naql. So al-hiss, he's talking about the five senses, touching, hearing, and the rest. So it is a source of knowledge. He recognized it. But he said this is that humans have, but also they share with animals. Al-hayawan. So this is a source of knowledge that we share with animals. Any animal, by default, they have these senses. I mean, sometimes more developed, sometimes less, but they have them. And what distinguishes us from animals is basically al-aql, the intellect, and he divides it into three subsections. So what he calls a tamyizi. So it is what allows us to have concepts of reality outside ourselves, the structure of things, how they fit together. We imagine them. So that's why he said it in mantiq. That's not the equivalent. It's mostly what they call at-tasawwurat, which is basically whether the concepts that you have of outside reality. Then he said the second one is what he called al-aql al-tajribi, and this is, as its name suggests, it's related to human experience, the knowledge that you gain from that, and it's from that knowledge, he said, it's mostly tasdiqat, so he's a logic, so he's going back to mantiq. And so tasdiqat, meaning you judged things whether they are right or not, whether they're true or false. So at-tajribi is mostly that. Now, and when you combine both of them, at-tajribi and at-tamyizi, you get al-aql an-nadari. And this synthesis, it is uniquely human. And he said a statement that's quite interesting, in that the more you have al-aql nadari, in a sense, the more you are human. Now, just to go back to al-aql tajribi, he classifies it in two. He said what he called al-am and al-khas. So al-aql tajribi al-khas, so it's your own experience in life. So it's, in a sense, it's a little bit subjective. As opposed to al-aql al-tajribi al-am, So it's based on the experiment or in the experience of humanity as a total, meaning it's something that you learn from your parents, you learn from society. And he said that some people they rely a little bit too much on التجريبي الخاص, meaning their own experience in life. He said that will take you just to a certain limit. You have to really open yourself to the experiences of others, because it will save you a lot of trouble. Otherwise, you are basically, history will be repeating itself, and you will make mistakes that you didn't have to make, and it will just make your life miserable. So that's the second source of knowledge, al-aql. Then there is a third source, and that source is al-naql as-sam'iyat, and it's related to revelation. Now, and this is obviously the realm of where you have angels and where you have anbiya. So prophets and angels, they have access, shall we say, in a sense, a direct access to this source, which the common of humans do not have. And here we can notice that al-anbiya, as human beings, their experience is the fullest, because they have al-naql, they have al-aql, and they have al-hiss. Al-malaika by default, they don't have access to al-hiss. So according to Ibn Khaldūn, they don't have a material body. Naam. So in that there is a whole discussion about Muslim scholars, but he seemed to take that opinion. So that definitely will exclude them from al-hiss in one aspect or another. And that makes, again, the Anbiya, who are the ones who have the fullest experience. And he said that here, al-aql, here he will talk about the relation of al-aql with this third realm, revelation and al-naql. And we have seen Ibn Khaldun in the previous chapters that how he almost seems materialistic. He's very rigorous. Things need to have a material explanation. And now in this chapter, he qualifies it. He said, yes, that's true when you are dealing with the material world. When you're dealing with the material world, yes, you by default, you adopt material explanations. And he said that wouldn't hold true if you go to Revelation. He said, aql, you have to recognize that human intellect, no matter how great it is, it has limits. And that doesn't impact the truthfulness, shall we say, of al-aql, but it just tells you that it has limits. And here, there is a small text that I would like to read, inshallah, for you, because it really helps us understand how Ibn Khaldun is organizing his thoughts, and when he is aggressively materialistic, to the point, I mean, materialistic is a very strong word, and where he doesn't do that. And that's in this for this quotation is in a section when he will be discussing Ilm al-Kalam. So we'll get back to it, just to give you the general context, that after an introduction that we talked about, he will give you the list of sciences and disciplines that are in his time. And here we have to know that he's really comprehensive. He will include even disciplines that he disapproves of, like the occult, magic. He will also talk about those because they exist. He is very well aware of them and he will give you exhaustive details about what's going on there. Then he will give you his evaluation. So then one of the disciplines that he will talk about obviously is ilm al-kalam. I mean, roughly translated as theology. And in this context, in this text, he will be talking about al-aql, so the intellect, and al-asbab, causes. And by causes, he by default means material causes, if such a thing. We'll see, he will discuss it now. And here he will say, I will start reading, وَخَلْقُ اللَّهِ أَكْبَرُ مِنْ خَلْقِ النَّاسِ. Okay? What he basically means by this, so a literal translation is the creation of Allah, the creation of God, is much greater than the creation of people. What does it mean? It basically means that reality, the world, the universe, existence that Allah created is way much bigger than what human beings are equipped to detect. Meaning that their senses are limited. They can know certain things, but there are realities that do exist that we may never reach. They are at least a potential. So that's why he said, وَالْحَصْرُ مَجْهُولٌ. الْحَصْرُ مَجْهُولٌ. Meaning, to limit reality for a human being is basically impossible. We don't know the limits of reality. We don't know the limits of the cosmos. We don't know. Al-hasru majhul. It is a very humbling thing that you have to recognize as a reality. You do not know everything. Okay? Al-wujudu awsa'u nitaqan min dhalik. So existence is way much more vast than that. Then he quotes the ayah, وَاللَّهُ مِنْ وَرَائِهِمْ مُحِيطٌ. So Allah is encompassing all of that. Now, then he said, فَاتَّهِمْ إِدْرَاكَكَ وَمُدْرَكَاتِكَ فِي الْحَصْرِ. Here, when you go beyond the senses and even beyond the mind, you have to be, literally, you have to accuse your knowledge when it comes to the illusion that you can have, that you can know everything that exists. You just can't. وَاتَّبِعْ here, since you can't, وَاتَّبِعْ مَا أَمَرَكَ الشَّارِعُ بِهِ مِنْ اعْتِقَادِكَ وَعَمَلِكَ. So in that reality that is immaterial, and he's here talking basically, he will give details, he's talking about al-ghayb. You know, things, for example, what happens after death. These realms, they are not accessible to the human mind. That's why he said, don't use your mind, meaning don't use your mind will not work there. وَاتَّبِعْ مَا أَمَرَكَ الشَّارِعُ بِهِ مِنْ اعْتِقَادِكَ وَعَمِلِكَ. Here you have to follow what the Prophet ﷺ has ordered regarding your belief and your deeds. فَهُوَ أَحْرَصُ عَلَى سَعَادَتِكَ. So he is more keen, more protective of your happiness, meaning of your akhirah. وَأَعْلَمُ فَهُوَ أَحْرَصُ عَلَى سَعَادَتِكَ وَأَعْلَمُ بِمَا يَنْفَعُكَ. He is more knowledgeable about what will benefit you. لأنه من طور فوق إدراكك. So because a Nabi has access to a knowledge that just you can't have access to. ومن نطاق أوسع من نطاق عقلك. And from a realm that is way much more spacious, vaster or more vast than your mind. نعم. Then he says something very important. وليس بذلك بقادح في العقل ومداركه. وليس بذلك بقادح في العقل ومداركه. And that does not diminish the mind, the intellect, and what the intellect can reach. It does not diminish the intellect. He's telling you here, this is not anti-intellectual. It's just a recognition of facts. He will praise the intellect even further, even more. بل العقل ميزان صحيح. العقل ميزان صحيح. So the mind, the intellect is a correct scale. It's a correct scale. فأحكامه يقينية لا كاذب فيها. So the rulings of the intellects are يقيني, are certain. There is certainty with the عقل. لا كذب فيها. There is no doubt about that. There is no lying for that. So the عقل in itself, it's consistent, it's correct, it's precise, it leads to certain or to certain knowledge or to knowledge certain. لا كذب فيها. Then he will qualify that further. غير أنك لا تطمع أن تزن به الجبال. Now here he will say, yes, the aql is a very correct scale. In fact, there is I think there is one expression that I missed here. He will compare the aql like the scale, like a gold scale. A gold scale. So a gold scale is very sensitive, very precise. It's a very good machine, if we can call it a machine. However, غير أنك لا تطمع أن تزن بها الجبال. However, you can't use that sensitive scale, that precise scale, to weigh mountains, because the proportions are just too different. A scale for gold cannot handle mountains. It doesn't say that the scale is not correct. It's just not its field. نعم. وهذا لا يدل أن الميزان في أحكامه غير صادق. وهذا لا يدل أن الميزان في أحكامه غير صادق. And again, and that doesn't mean that the scale is not accurate. لكن للعقل حد يقف عنده. However, the mind has a limit where it has to stop. ولا يتعدى طوره, and it doesn't go beyond that. حتى يكون له أن يحيط بالله وصفاته. So the mind, the intellect cannot encompass Allah and His attributes. فإنه ذرة من ذرات الوجود الحاصل منه. Because the mind is a very trivial matter in the existence. It does exist, it's accurate, it's precise, but it's ultimately very limited when compared with full existence, shall we say. وتفطن في هذا لغلط من يقدم العقل على السمع في أمثال هذه القضايا. So be aware for this mistake from those who will use the mind against revelation in these matters. The matters that he means al-ghayb, meaning things like al-akhirah, the nature of Allah, and so forth. The mind is just not done, is not for that. So, and for that, he said the source of it is revelation. And he said that from our daily experiences, we have a notion that something exists beyond our minds. And he gives the example of true dreams, الرؤيا. So الرؤيا is especially when ru'ya that comes true one way or another, that's an indication that there is something beyond our senses and beyond our intellect. And that's the realm where the prophets are the masters. So once again, you have al-hiss, which we share with animals. We have al-aql, which distinguishes us from animals, but also there is revelation, which is beyond the aql, but we need it for al-akhirah. And in this category, in these shall we say ontology or epistemology, in this categorization, he is very consistent, and he will draw conclusions that for example, one interesting conclusion, he said that, for example, prophets, they focus on their main job description is to help us with things that are beyond our intellect. Okay, and for example, Anbiya, the main purpose of sending prophets is not to teach us some kind of a technology. Okay, and he will use the known hadith of Ta'bir al-Nakhl, where some people asked the Prophet ﷺ whether they should do some kind of pollination of dates, and he didn't see that. And in the end, he will tell them, I mean, in the end of the whole hadith, that you know more your dunya than I. Antum a'lamu bi dunyakum. Okay. For Ibn Khaldūn, that tells you what the focus of prophethood is. Now, and so that's for ilm. So after this theoretical introduction, he will move to enumerate the sciences in his time, and he will give you an introduction to every science, every discipline. He will give you how it develops. So, for example, if you are interested in any of these disciplines, it's really a good read, in the sense that it's very concise. It gives you how it developed, who are the main actors, who are the main scholars, what are the main books, at least until his time. You know, it's really it's very helpful, and he is very fair. He's very fair, and he's concise, and what I said fair because sometimes he will defend positions that you might not expect him to defend, and if he has an opinion, this is very consistent of Ibn Khaldūn, even if maybe it's not the majority opinion, he will exactly tell you what he thinks. Now, so he will start. So he will basically describe, divide ulum, and in a sense they are related to these three sections: al-naql, al-aql, and al-hiss. So al-naql, revelation, they will be the Islamic disciplines, نعم, like علوم القرآن, علوم الحديث, الفقه, أصول الفقه, علم الكلام, علم التصوف, and علم تعبير الرؤية. So these are Islamic disciplines. Then for al-aql, and he said this is something shared between all humanity. It's just an accumulation of knowledge and experience, and he will start with mathematics, and he really gives mathematics. He starts with mathematics, and he gives you the sections, the subfields that you have, especially at that time. Then he will go to engineering and applied mathematics, shall we say. So العلوم الهندسية, علم الهيئة, which is basically astronomy. Then he gives a section about علم المنطق, logic, and he's separating it from philosophy on purpose. نعم, because it's something that people can agree about. Then علم الطبيعيات. So علم الطبيعيات, physics, but physics in the old sense, meaning it will include things like medicine and so forth. Then the last one in this section is al-filaha, agriculture. نعم. Now, but after this, he will include disciplines that people studied, and that generally speaking, by default, that they are more related, that he generally speaking disagree with them, and you can see why. But certain, for example, علوم السحر, magic. And what's interesting about when he studied, I will just read them. So, علم الإلهيات, and what he means by علم الإلهيات is speculative theology, meaning the theology of that is based on speculation or is based on the intellect without access to revelation. And he called it علم الإلهيات. So don't confuse it with modern Arabic, which, because in modern Arabic it means divinity, and it's not exactly what Ibn Khaldūn means. Then he said علوم السحر, and it's so he's talking about magic and the occult, and he will give details that are exactly what incantations they do, what kind of symbols they write, the times where they do it. It's very sometimes it's almost disturbing, but he disproves of it, but he knows it. This is what they are doing. Now, then you have something called علم أسرار الحروف, and in here hopefully we'll have more time to talk about it. And then related to that is علم الكيمياء. The same thing. In علم الكيمياء in modern Arabic it means chemistry. That's not what he means. He means something like called I think it's pronounced alchemy. نعم. Which in Arabic, in modern Arabic, usually it's called usually السيمياء. And after that, he will start refuting these. He will give you his opinion and why they are not reliable, if not completely false. So that's why you have إبطال الفلسفة وفساد منتحلها. And by philosophy here, he means specifically speculating about al-akhirah and about immaterial existence, metaphysics. So metaphysics, using speculation, for him is just, first of all, it does not respect even the norms of logic that philosophy claims to adopt. So there is a contradiction right there, and it's just no way. It's just beyond the reach of the human intellect. And after, so then إبطال صناعة النجوم, so astrology. He is very clearly against astrology. There are more things to be said about it. And then another, the last one is that alchemy, how he will just deconstruct it, shall we say, in the sense that it's just misleading. We'll talk more about it. Now, what I wanted to say that, so when he goes to علوم الدين, so for example, علوم القرآن, he will talk about the things, like tafsir, qira'at, and so forth. And just what I found quite interesting about علوم القرآن, when he talked about al-qira'at, it just answered the question that I had before. And he said that when it comes to al-qira'at, why the masters of qira'at until now, you have people like Abu Amr ad-Dani, and from Dania in Andalus, in what's sometimes called Islamic Spain, and Ash-Shatibi, which is also from Shatiba in Andalus. So these people, I mean, Ash-Shatibiya is still studied until now. Now, Abu Amr Dani is also one of the greatest authorities until now. He gives it a historical explanation. He said he will refer to Al-Hajib. So there was a local dynasty where the ruler, he was very interested and seemingly quite skillful in qira'at, and he, shall we say, heavily funded and sponsored people in that field. And he said that's why those scholars are coming from there. Of course, at least it gave you a wave, and people, and it pushed other people later. So, so this historical explanation, it was quite illuminating in a sense. Now, علوم الحديث, obviously, he gives you the history of علوم الحديث and how it's evolved. And here, just to show you that, you know, he not only is fair, and in these, it will, the scholarship, the Islamic scholarship of Ibn Khaldūn really is visible. And here, obviously, Ibn Khaldūn is a Maliki, but for example, in علوم الحديث, he will be defending Imam Abu Hanifa. And here will take you, there is a text that we will talk about it. And so in this text, he said, وقد يقول بعض المتعصبين المتعسفين إن منهم من كان قليل البضاعة في الحديث. So he's talking about the imams, the 4 imams of fiqh. And he said that, and maybe some unfair, biased people will say that some of these leading scholars of fiqh, they were not good in hadith. قليل البضاعة في الحديث, and they didn't know much really. And so it's an accusation that unfortunately is old. So they say, إن منهم من كان قليل البضاعة في الحديث ولهذا قلت روايته. That's why we don't have a lot of narrations through them. And he said, ولا سبيل إلى هذا المعتقد في كبار الأئمة. So there is no way that this belief is correct regarding these masters of علوم الفقه, these imams. He said, لأن الشريعة إنما تؤخذ من الكتاب والسنة. He said, first of all, as a basic thing, Sharia is taken from Al-Kitab and Sunnah. And do you think they don't know Sunnah? And they will end up A'imma? Then he will be speaking specifically about Imam Abu Hanifa. And he will give an explanation that I personally didn't know of. I heard perhaps other explanation, but not this one. والإمام أبو حنيفة إنما قلت روايته لما شدد في شروط الرواية والتحمل. So Imam Abu Hanifa has fewer narrations because his conditions for narration were really very, shall we say, very high, very strict. وضعف الحديث إذا عارضه العقل القاطع. So he has very high conditions for narrators and transmission, and he also used another criteria that if a hadith seems to go against something that is عقلي قاطع, so something that we witness, that is absolutely true, we believe it through our mind that it's absolutely true, and the hadith seems to go against it. So he said that Imam Abu Hanifa will put this hadith aside. ضعفه, literally he will consider it as has some weakness. فاستصعب. So that's why Imam Abu Hanifa, he found it difficult to narrate these ahadith. وقلت من أجلها. That's why his narrations are few, because he will narrate only the ahadith that he's sure of. وقلت من أجلها روايته فقل حديثه. So his narrations are few. لا أنه ترك رواية الحديث متعمدا. Not that he purposefully did not do the transmission of hadith. فحاشاه من ذلك. So he said his status is way above to do something like that. And then he continues, ويدل على أنه من كبار المجتهدين في علم الحديث اعتماد مذهبه بينهم والتعويل عليه واعتباره ردا وقبولا. And he said a sign that he was mujtahid in علم الحديث, the fact that the very early muhaddith, they adopted his madhab in fiqh and they relied on it, and also that other not only the early muhaddithun but other scholars, for example the a'imma of the other madhab, took his opinion seriously. So it's basically this idea, inshallah. والكل عن اجتهاد, and that's anyway what he did, it was عن اجتهاد. You might perhaps disagree with him, but he was definitely a mujtahid. نعم. And so for fiqh, he will do the same thing, give you the history of fiqh, who are the main scholars, the main books, and so forth. And after that, he will talk about usul al-fiqh. But before we reach usul al-fiqh, in fiqh he also does something similar. And since he's Maliki, he will give a very what he considered a misconception about one of the unique features of the Maliki madhab, which is عمل أهل المدينة. And of course, we are talking about Ibn Khaldūn. At least he was, Qadi al-Qudat of the Maliki in Egypt. So his opinion is to be considered. No. He said, وَعْلَمْ, he was talking about al-ijma' as one of the usul. وَعْلَمْ أَنَّ الْإِجْمَاع, and he defines it, إِنَّمَا هُوَ الْإِتِّفَاقُ عَلَى الْأَمْرِ الدِّينِ عَنِ اجْتِهَادٍ. So al-ijma' is an agreement about something religious, عن اجتهاد, but out of ijtihad, and he basically underlines this, عن اجتهاد. ومالك رحمه الله لم يعتبر عمل أهل المدينة من هذا المعنى. So for Imam Malik, the amal, the practice of people of Medina is not like this. It doesn't fit in this definition. Why? Because it is not عن اجتهاد. وإنما اعتبره من حيث اتباع الجيل بالمشاهدة للجيل. However, he considered that one generation adopts what the previous generation did بالمشاهدة, by witnessing that and slowly adopting it. So Imam Malik is basically the third generation, so tabi' tabi'in. So before him are tabi'in, and before that are sahaba. You have two generations before. So it's something that is inherited, and it's not something that was subject of ijtihad. وإنما اعتبره من حيث اتباع الجيل بالمشاهدة للجيل إلى أن ينتهي إلى الشارع صلوات الله وسلامه عليه, until it reaches the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. So two generations before Imam Malik. وضرورة اقتدائهم تعين ذلك. And the fact that the iqtida, that they are following the previous generation, so these two generations basically, necessitates that was not an ijtihad. نعم المسألة ذكرت في باب الإجماع. He confesses, yes, the matter, the question was mentioned in the chapter of ijtihad. However, he said that's not ideal. Why? ولو ذكرت المسألة في باب فعل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وتقريره. So had this issue been mentioned in the chapter dealing with فعل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وتقريره, what the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام did, and تقرير in the sense that he approved of, أو مع الأدلة المختلف فيها. So either in that chapter, in that he's talking here, so these are especially in the أصول الفقه, أو مع الأدلة المختلف فيها, or with أدلة shall we say, proofs that are debatable in the sense that people of fiqh disagree about. مثل مذهب الصحابي, the madhab of Sahabi, what the Sahabi did, and especially it seems on a consistent manner, madhab. وشرع من شرع من قبلنا. So this is at least in the Maliki, it's one of their usul, شرع من قبلنا. So the Sharia of people before us, meaning before Islam. والاستصحاب, so in the concept of istisḥab. So either in these chapters, لكان أليق, it would have been more befitting. So it's just, it tells you about his skill, and especially in this field, where he knows obviously what he's dealing with. In usul al-fiqh, he did the same thing, and here it's he seemed to be since we talked about Hanafiya, he really likes the books of al-Ahnaf in usul al-fiqh. He said وَلَهُمُ الْيَدُ الطُّولَى. He said they are really the masters in this field. Talking about usul al-fiqh, Ibn Khaldūn lived during the same time as Sahib al-Muwafaqat, Imam Shatibi. They lived during the same time. Okay. However, Ibn Khaldūn left to the Mashriq, left to the east, to Egypt and so forth, and he has not mentioned. I have not seen him mention Imam Shatibi, and that's probably because either he left before Imam Shatibi wrote his book, or he did not read it. Otherwise, I would assume that he would have mentioned him. Now, علم الكلام, we already talked about al-aql and about al-asbab, and just related to that. So al-asbab, the causes, shall we say? He said that, which is a basic Muslim thing, that you should not stop with asbab. You should recognize them, especially when you are dealing with the material world. And that's what he does, for example, in the previous chapters, how he explains phenomena, especially sociological phenomena, a lot of times a very materialistic explanation. Okay? But he said you shouldn't stop there. Okay? Otherwise, that can be very misleading and very harmful to you personally, meaning for your najat, for your akhirah. Now, then he talked about ilm al-tasawwuf, so he will go through the same thing, and because Ibn Khaldūn was also, when he was in Egypt at a certain time, it seems that he was responsible of a certain zawiyah, so he does have an element of tasawwuf. You might not have felt it when we were talking about how he explains the material world. But and his father also seems to be from the people of Tasawwuf. So he's very familiar, at least to some degree, with that. Okay, he will definitely disagree with certain mutasawwifa, but he seems to be quite knowledgeable of what's going on. Now, and the last one is ilm ta'bir al-ru'ya. So we'll vaguely translate as dream interpretation, and he will give you the rules for that. And how it is and how it should be done. And we said that it is here where he said that's a hint that there is a realm that is beyond the physical realm. Now, after finishing with ulum ad-din, he will go to the sciences that we already mentioned. I will just read them. So mathematics, engineering, astronomy, logic, physics in the general sense, and agriculture. And we talked about how he specifically exclude ilm al-mantiq from falsafa, because he for him it's related to al-aql, the scale for to judge things. نعم. And we talked about the disciplines that he disapproves of, but however he's very aware of what's happening there, and basically they are علم الإلهيات, السحر, magic, أسرار الحروف, الكيمياء, الفلسفة, صناعة النجوم, and so forth. Now, after this, he will give us some remarks and, shall we say, even advice. And so he has these notes here. For example, this is basically talking about education, how education should be done. نعم. How education should be done. For example, here he will say, excuse me. First of all, he talks about maqasid al-ta'lif, meaning how writing should be done. What are the problems? And he tend to be very practical. He wants you really to in a sense to respect the terminology that is used in the field and to be very precise. نعم. And there he started some criticism. He said كثرة التآليف عائق عن التحصيل. So the basic idea that sometimes certain fields, the ta'alif, what has been written in that field is so vast that if you rely on yourself only to study that field, you'll just be lost. And this is, it goes back to the fact that you need a teacher so that he will tell you which books to start from, to start with. And once you cover the basics, if you can, obviously you can read more, but that will be, you're already mature in the field. He also criticized كثرة الاختصارات مخلة بالتعليم. الاختصارات, he doesn't seem to be a fan of المختصرات, so the abridgments. And he said that usually what happens, they become what he calls مستغلقات. They become impossible to read. And one word has so many meanings. And he said that especially for a beginner, that's just too much. You are overburdening a beginner. That's why he said مخلة بالتعليم. It's not really helpful. نعم. I mean, we might disagree with that, but that's an opinion that he presented. نعم. Another criticism is العلوم الآلية لا توسع فيها الأنظار. He said that العلوم الآلية that we are going to talk about, meaning the language, mantiq, and so forth, that they shouldn't, in a sense, they shouldn't become an end in themselves. They shouldn't become an end in themselves. So obviously you have to cover the basics, but he's not a fan of al-mutawwalat, you know, the encyclopedic works that are only in al-ulum al-aliyah. No. And here, talking about education, he will be comparing how education is done in the Muslim world in his time. And he will focus on at least 3 places. For example, the methodology of people in Andalus, the methodology of people in North Africa, and here he will compare with what we call Tunisia now and what we call Morocco now, and the people of what he called the people of the East. He means places like especially Egypt. Now, and the difference is that certain places, for example, will start almost exclusively with the Quran. Okay. Other places they will start with the language first, and he will be comparing, you know, which one is better and why. And sometimes certain certain methodology is better for one purpose as opposed to the other. One thing that he disapproved of regardless is الشدة على المتعلمين مضرة بهم. الشدة على المتعلمين مضرة بهم. That severity, meaning being tough on pupils and students, is harmful for them. Okay, you should not be tough on your students. And he said, for sometimes they just cannot handle it. Not everyone has the same intelligence, so don't expect the same thing from every student. And he said that also it will push them to avoid punishment by doing things like lying. They will just lie to you so that they will avoid punishment. So it is, for him, being rough on students is a bad idea. No. Things the opposite, of course, الرحلة في طالب العلوم. So he definitely encouraged people to seek knowledge elsewhere. نعم. And then some what he remarked that العلماء أبعد الناس عن السياسة. And he will explain it inshallah. So العلماء, so scholars, are as a rule the farthest people from politics. What he means is that because ulama are people who rely on a daily basis on their intellect. They're very, to use a modern time, they're intellectuals. And he said these people, they tend to be too abstract for daily life politics. Generally speaking, they are not a good fit to manage daily life. He said the person of an average intelligence who is, they are used to, they work with their hands, they deal with the reality on a daily basis, they are more practical. Okay? In a sense, the intellectuals, they belong to the ivory tower. They do a good job there. They see the big picture. They're very good at it. But generally speaking, they are not. They do not tend to be good in managing daily life. Okay, it's a general remark. It has exceptions, but this is what he noticed. Now, another thing that he noticed, that حملة العلم في الإسلام أكثرهم العجم. People who carry knowledge in Islam, scholars in Islam, most of them are not Arabs. Okay, and he will explain it with what we have seen in the previous chapters, that because ilm later it became a craft, meaning, to use perhaps a modern, it became an industry. So in the early generations of Islam, the first, second, third generation, okay, so for example, these people, they didn't need to learn Arabic. It was their language. They didn't need to know the customs. It was their customs. But the farther we go from there, those things they are acquired. They are acquired, hence they became a craft. They became an industry. And who is good at these? People of cities, urbanites. And most urbanites, they are not Arabs. So for him, there is a sociological explanation. Now, in the last, in the end of the chapter, he will spend quite a time about talking about ulum al-alat, and especially about the Arabic language. The history of nahu, the history of it's called al-lugha, what he comes, dictionary making and philology, literature, and so forth. and he will just spend time talking about how the Arabic language has changed in his time, and that it's no longer the Fusha, what we call no Fusha, what he called the Lugha of Mudar, the Lugha of Mudar. And so that's why he said basically now everybody has to study Arabic language. Even if the person is, shall we say, an ethnic Arab, they still have to study the Arabic language, because the early, what he called the Lughat Mudar, is basically in as it was, is lost. So we'll stop here, inshallah. If we have some questions, we'll deal with them, inshallah. Also, if the sisters maybe have questions, we can also take that, please.
Assalamu alaikum. And when he said that we must know Arabic, was it just enough so we can read the Quran, or we have to be so proficient that we should be able to do discourse?
No, what I meant for scholars, if you want to become a scholar, you have to learn it no matter who you are. Yes, if you want to be a scholar. I didn't mean it that it's a necessity for every Muslim. It's recommended. No, but no, I was talking about scholars. No.
The other one, I'm just curious because I can't get my head around it. Having a hadith that goes against the natural intellect, is there? Can you just give an example?
I cannot give an example. But for example, because these hadith by default, for example, if we were talking about the specifics, the specific case of Imam Abu Hanifa, he didn't narrate them. He didn't spread them. It looks. That's why I said they don't. That's why I was careful. I didn't say they go against. They seem to go against. So that's why I was cautious.
There's a question online. I might butcher this, but what is the clear distinction between ilahiyat, and he wrote AST, Ibn Khaldūn saw it, and ilm al-kalam?
So ilahiyat for Ibn Khaldūn is part of philosophy. Okay, so ilm al-kalam is still bound by Islam. Ilm al-kalam is still bound by Islam, because in its definition he said that ilm al-kalam really is a defense mechanism against those who says that aql can challenge Islam. And the response, okay, we will use aql and we'll show you that's not the case. So the reference is still Islamic. So al-mutakallimun by default they are Muslims. So al-ilahiyat, and ilahiyat in his sense is that when philosophers, they will talk about how there are 9 minds or 9 intellects, and for example certain that every planet has an intellect, and that intellect has an influence, and it's related somehow to perhaps creation or affecting what's going on in this. He doesn't buy any of that. He said that's pure speculation at best, and it's not consistent with your own logic, so he doesn't accept it.
Second question, does kalam include intellect / speculative ideas on metaphysics?
So that's for example the question. Some of them try to do that, And that's why, for example, the issue with al-Mu'tazila. So al-Mu'tazila, in a sense, they used aql at least more than others in the sense of for example, the issue of as-sifat. They denied as-sifat, the attributes of Allah Azza wa Jal, based on aql, which, for example, the Sunni groups, the Ash'ari, the Maturidi, they don't do. So that's what they are not accepted as mainstream, to say the least. Now, and that's the criticism of Ibn Khaldūn himself. He said, for example, لا يمكن الإحاطة بالصفات. He said you can't use your mind to know what the sifats, the divine attributes in themselves are really. Everybody basically agrees. Everybody agrees that Allah in Himself, shall we say, his essence, his nature, is just beyond human capacity. Okay. So everybody agrees about that. So al-Mu'tazila, they used al-aql also for the sifats. So that's one of the criticism against them. The punishment also, their concept of divine justice also is based on aql. So a lot of tenets of the faith, they tried to judge them according to their understanding of aql. And other groups like Ash'ari and Maturidiyya, when they will respond to them, in fact, one of the responses is that, okay, even aql, we cannot agree that's a logical consequence of what you are saying. The whole thing is that aql is at least inconclusive there. No. Okay, if you don't have questions, thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.